The boy ran up to the millionaire and called him his father, and he was dumbfounded by what happened next. Louis was raised in a foster home. He didn't know the first thing about his parents. His mother abandoned him to the nurse's care and ran away after being rushed to the hospital. He was always sick and had serious developmental retardation, probably why none of the adoptive parents wanted him. In spite of a challenging childhood, Louis turned out to be smart and goal-oriented. He never felt shy about telling his friends and himself all the time that he was going to be successful. Their laughs and mockery never seemed to wear off his confidence and conviction. Soon, as he became of age, he left the orphanage and began working hard. Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story. Being the intelligent and smart individual he is, he quickly figured out and understood the transformative impact of e-commerce and realized e-commerce was the way of the future. Having ridden the first wave of prosperity brought upon by e-commerce, Louis became a millionaire thanks to his online store, which quickly rose to prominence in the country. The man was humble and constantly sought to help the orphanage where he grew up. On vacations, he staged children's theatrical presentations and would bring various treats and gifts for the youngsters. Though he was continually working to better the lives of the children in the orphanage, he understood the impossibility of providing the kids with their one true dream, to have parents they could call their own. Having lived all his formative years without parents, he sure felt their pain. At that moment, it dawned on him how fast time was passing him by without a family of his own. All through his life, he had always felt lonely, and the thought of having someone to share his life with seemed like an uncomfortable and scary thing for him. Louis was ready to start a family, but all his romantic relationships were short-lived. It seemed like women were only drawn to him for his material possessions. He longed for someone to affectionately love him for who he was as an ordinary person. Like any other holiday, he visited the orphanage with gifts for the kids. The kids were outside, as they always were, and many of them who knew him began waving joyfully. Some ran to hug him to show their excitement at seeing him. He waved back at them with a loving smile. A 5-year-old boy, who had been recently brought to the orphanage, suddenly emerged from the group of little children, ran over to Louis, wrapped his arms around his legs, and began to wail. He was calling Louis his daddy and begging for him to be taken home. One of the teachers tried to distract the rest of the children by drawing their attention from the scene. The agony in the boy's voice pierced through Louis's heart. He was supposed to have a lengthy conversation with the head of the orphanage, but couldn't stand the enormous rush of emotional stimulus he was experiencing and had to leave. His encounter with the boy left him mystified. For the remainder of the day, Louis's thoughts were never far from the boy. His mind was bombarded with questions. How could he be his father when he is just a newbie? His thoughts kept drifting back to his days back in the orphanage, and he began to relive his childhood pains. Nevertheless, on the off chance that the kid actually mistook Louis for his father, it would appear that he would be justified in doing so. Being far away from parents in the midst of total strangers can cause traumatic effects on the kid. Having empathy for all abandoned children and a desire to assist them in some way, the man decided to support the orphanage financially and in other ways as well. It was Louis's way of instilling confidence in the youngsters by telling them that they were unique, that they had abilities, and that they could achieve success in life like Louis himself. He returned to the shelter for the second time the following day. For a variety of reasons, the small child who called him daddy caused him to have momentary concerns. Louis determined that all he needed to do was meet up with the headmistress and discuss the situation. The woman greeted Louis with a smile and instantly apologized, attempting to explain to the guy that such incidents were normal at the shelter, as children were always hoping to be whisked away and enjoy the warmth of their family. As the headmistress finished apologizing, she admitted that something unusual was happening. It had been 2 weeks since the boy's arrival in the shelter, and he was known as Ben. Indeed, he recently ran into Louis. He claimed that the figure he drew to be his father looked a lot like him. The lady grabbed an organizer from the table and pulled out a few doodles in response to these statements. Louis was taken to his knees by the sight of their faces. Despite the photographs being far from precise, his right cheek's unique scar could still be seen. Louis instantly recalled how he inflicted this profound wound on himself through a school fight. When Ben's teacher walked into the room, she told him she had done some research on his artwork. She claimed Ben was delighted to inform her that his mother had told him about his father when he appeared on the big screen during a television show, then said that Ben had already packed his belongings and was waiting to be picked up by his dad the day before he left. In an effort to keep the young tutor from saying anything extraneous, the headmistress winced softly but engagingly. "Even if someone called me daddy, that doesn't automatically make him one," he thought to himself. When Lewis finished studying the artwork, he inquired about the boy's mother. It turned out that no one knew the child had just been put on the orphanage's porch without any document. As of now, police have been unable to locate or identify the youngster because he does not know his last name or residence, the headmistress said. Sighing, Lewis sluggishly scratched his head. If it was really his son, the guy would not want him to grow up in an orphanage. Of course, he had been with women and could have been negligent about having protected sex. The possibility of Ben being his son was hard to digest, but it looked like something beautiful. Stepping into the corridor, Lewis came face to face with the teacher who had been waiting for him. Dorothy was her name, and she had recently graduated from college and was working as a teacher there. She informed Lewis that Ben hadn't eaten since their encounter yesterday. She also revealed that she had discovered an old photograph of Lewis as an infant and noticed some striking resemblance between his photograph and Ben. She expressed her concern for Ben and promised to help make sense of the situation. He met with a friend in the evening and shared what was disturbing his conscience. Andrew, too, was raised in an orphanage, and he empathized completely with his friend's plight. He suggested Lewis undergo a DNA test to definitively resolve the matter. Lewis thought it was an excellent suggestion. He decided that, in the morning, he would phone Dorothy and ask her to bring a lock of the boy's hair. The following day, they met at a cafe where Dorothy presented him with the material for the DNA test. The teacher couldn't contain her excitement, as she was confident there was a biological bond between them. She claimed that Ben had a hard time calming down, but over the course of the previous 2 weeks, he had been a model student. Even though she didn't learn much about his mother, Dorothy was confident that the youngster ran into Lewis's arms for a purpose. When asked about his mother, all he could say was repeat her name, Alice, and that she was ill and sobbed when she left him. All throughout the night, Lewis was engrossed in his thoughts as he was recalling incessantly. He once knew a girl named Alice. They crossed paths at a convention. She envisioned herself designing designer outfits and eventually launching her own brand of outfits. Lewis dated her for a week before deciding he wasn't ready for a serious commitment. He concluded their romance by avoiding her and not answering her calls. Was she, in fact, the same Alice he knew? Lewis devoted most of his efforts to obtaining information about the woman. He quickly discovered that she had died a week prior in a hospital. Lewis was appalled. After all, he became extremely ashamed of what he had done to the woman. He truly believed she was in love with him at the time, but, fearful of his feelings and the potential of a meaningful relationship, he abandoned her, and now he could not even seek her forgiveness. When Lewis thought about Ben, he realized that Alice could have had a son with anyone. However, the man abruptly understood that it was irrelevant at the moment. He chose to adopt the boy in order to make amends with the boy's mother. Adoption papers were drawn out by the man's lawyers, and he informed the headmistress at the orphanage that he was adopting Ben. He was hesitant to go out with the youngster since he hadn't yet received authorization. Lewis knew that the lonely man wasn't really suited for the job of an adoptive parent because he was always alone. Ben's DNA results confirmed that he was Lewis's son a few days later. Things were a lot easier to finalize now. Dorothy burst into tears of pleasure when she heard the news. He had finally discovered his father, and she was overjoyed to hear about it. The headmistress did not disagree with Lewis when he asked her to take the youngster immediately. The youngster was escorted to the headmistress's office, where Lewis smiled at him and cradled him in his arms. Their eyes met, and he said that they were going home together. Lewis had been adjusting to his new role as a father for a month now. The pace of daily life has slowed down. He had a vision of Alice one day, forgiving him and thanking him for not abandoning her son, the mother claimed. The man, of course, was aware that the dream was a figment of his imagination, but he was nonetheless relieved. Lewis proposed to Dorothy a year after becoming a father for the first time. He didn't miss out on love because he had the luxury of time to sort out his emotions. Both of them kept in touch and gradually became closer to one another after the adoption. Dorothy gladly agreed to Lewis's proposal. A few years later, Ben welcomed a baby sister into the world. If you enjoyed the video, kindly give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section, and share with others.